Hello again, everybody. My name is Aaron Dukette with U.S. Term Limits, State Director here in Kentucky. And we have with us a pledge signer, someone who had signed the U.S. Term Limits pledge to support the resolution allowing the states to come together to propose term limits for Congress, something sorely needed. It's an issue that polls at 82% nationally and 84% in Kentucky, because I think Kentuckians have 2% more common sense than the average bear, I guess. So I'm going to welcome you, introduce you to Rhett Ramsey, who is a candidate running for the Kentucky House of Representatives. Rhett, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So thanks, first of all, for having me, Aaron.
Sure.
My name is Rhett Ramsey. I'm an attorney in Monticello, Kentucky. I'm running for state representative in the 52nd District, which is McCreary County, Wayne County, and portions of southwestern Pulaski County. This is my first run for political office. I'm a lifelong Republican. I was born in Somerset, Kentucky. I always tell everybody because the Wayne County Hospital didn't deliver babies, but lived in Monticello my whole life with the exception of going to college. And, was ready to come back home once I got finished with law school. Started a practice here and, just really wanted to give back to my community and thought that running for state representative, representing our area in the state house, would be one of the best ways for me to give back.
Yeah, and so, one of the planks that you kind of basically added to your campaign is by signing our pledge of support for congressional term limits. To give us a little sense of, why you want term limits on Congress and why you signed up on the pledge to get it done.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously term limits are something that was not originally put into our U.S. Constitution. My belief on that is because I think the Founding Fathers never envisioned that there would be career politicians in our system. There was a group of people that had fought so hard against tyranny and for liberty that they just, in my mind, imagined that, the future generations would feel the same way, and there would always be this sense of government by the people for the people. Obviously President Washington set the tone whenever he voluntarily stepped away from the presidency after 2 terms and set that precedent. And that's something that, was deviated from over the years. And then obviously there was the amendment to the Constitution for presidential term limits. So, I just feel like congressional term limits is something else that needs to be done through a constitutional amendment because it's common sense that we need good government, and it just seems like over time, special interests get in the way, big money gets in the way, and I think a lot of times representatives can lose touch with their constituency. And so, like I said, I think it's something that wasn't originally envisioned as being necessary, but I always think if our founding fathers could be here today, what would they say about the way that we govern? And I think that they would be all for term limits on the legislative branch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring up the founders and how they viewed, it was never called term limits at that time. They called it rotation of office. But it's something that actually existed that, Ben Franklin wrote it into the Constitution of Pennsylvania. The Articles of Confederation, interestingly, had a rotation of office provision. So there were term limits. Somehow in translation to the much superior document, the term limits on the legislature got kind of omitted, probably for the reasons you say, that they really didn't envision why it would be that attractive for that long. And be really kind of a penance to pay to go to Congress and serve truly. And it's interesting. We think of it sometimes as, oh, well, the founders didn't want it. Well, that's not necessarily true. Thomas Jefferson, when he received the Constitution, was really, really dismayed that term limits were not put into the legislature because he said eventually that would be worn out. Others like George Mason also had similar objections. So it wasn't uniform. And I don't know if you know this, we recently found out that the first time that it was discussed doing exactly what we're doing here, which is to use the state legislatures to propose an amendment for term limits on Congress, the first time that someone suggested that idea was the very year after the Constitution was ratified. So
you've taught me something.
Goes back. Yeah. So here we are, a couple hundred years later, and we're late.
Yeah.
And there was a push in the 90s. Of course, that involved getting Congress to term limit themselves, and of course, I wonder that you feel like that. It seems to me like that's very contrary to human nature. I like to say that it's like, asking chickens to vote for Colonel Sanders. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that obviously once people get in power, they like to stay in power. And honestly, my true belief on this is I don't think that a lot of individuals that have been in power for a long time might necessarily do things for the wrong reason or anything like that. I think that someone can become blind to certain things. I don't really think that there's any ill will or malice in a lot of these people who have become career politicians. But again, you sort of become blind to it, I guess, once you're in that position. So I think it's important for groups like U.S. term limits to keep pushing this issue, keep dealing with the new blood that's coming into state legislatures and things of that nature, and really try to push the issue with people who have not become, for lack of a better term, jaded and become part of the process for a long time.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious what you think about this. We sometimes hear an objection, and it's not usually from the people, not usually from voters. I mean, occasionally it is, but the polling's through the roof. So it's not usually this comes from politicians, but they'll say, well, we have term limits, there are elections already, how would you respond to that? I mean, are elections working alone?
Well, I mean, I think if you just look at the percentages, they'll tell you that no, elections don't work as term limits. I know we have instances every now and then of, an upset occurring or a grassroots movement really taking off. I understand what people mean when they say that. And term limits could have an unintended consequence of maybe having a really great leader for their people, their area, that gets pushed out due to the term limits. But that might be something necessary. I think that money has started to control elections so much that, if you look, incumbents always raise more money than a grassroots candidate that's trying to knock them off, unless, it's somebody who's extremely wealthy in their own right, they can self-fund or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But, they always say the three most important things in politics are money, money, and money.
Right.
So, you start getting those influences in there, and you can push messages with money. And I understand, money, it's been ruled, money is speech. But at a certain point, I think it's important to have a baseline rule that at a certain point you're not going to allow that to happen. There's going to be a change. There's going to be a turnover. And again, we've done it with the presidency. Yeah. And I think that if you've done it with the presidency, it's important to do it with the legislative branch as well.
I think you're right. You bring up the presidency. I like to respond if we hear that we have the term limits already. There are elections. I say, okay, well, I think that checks out in theory, but maybe not so much in practice. But I like to ask, well, then will it be willing to sign a pledge to repeal the 22nd Amendment? Right. Hardly anyone's going to say, oh yeah, we got to get rid of presidential term limits. I think that's pretty universally accepted that the 22nd Amendment did a lot of good for the country. Yeah, that we have the rotation of office there, regardless of your party. That it's a good transition of power.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Good. And so, of all the different possibilities, and good outcomes that can come out of the establishment of term limits on Congress, what's one of the great outcomes you would like to see happen from that?
It's a very interesting question. I think one thing that would come from it is you would have legislators that would not be afraid to stand up and make the tough decisions that need to be made for the betterment of our country. If they know that their time is limited anyway, they're not constantly jockeying with special interest and PACs and things like that to keep their campaign coffers going. If they know they're going to be heading out the door, I think they're going to be more inclined to do what's right more so than what's beneficial. And again, not saying that we are overrun with tons of legislators that do what's beneficial over what's right, but I think I don't think there's any dispute that it does happen.
Yeah,
sometimes.
You mentioned, with term limits, someone who's a favorite of ours, no matter who you are, may have to go in time.
Right.
But at the same time, I think just about everybody, right? For someone that you would miss in Congress, that has to go, I'm sure everyone has 4 or 5 that they'd like to see go with them. And so
Absolutely.
with the constitutional amendment, that happens. So,
Yeah.
a 5 out of 6, I think it's a pretty good shake, right? And it leads to a even playing field, across the board, and frees up that seat.
I think all you have to do is look at Congress's approval rating as a whole, and I
Right.
think that you're justified in your thought there.
Well, and their re-election rate is about 95%. So how does that add up? You can blame the electorate. You can just say, well, people are stupid or lazy, or whatever you're going to say there. I don't blame us. I don't think we have real choices, and that's part of the system of the incumbent party that we're dealing with here.
Right, and I think those percentages even will dissuade some people from even trying to run for the office. You got very well qualified, intelligent people that just say, the barrier is too high, the barrier to entry is too high, and won't even give it a shot. And so I think we would have much higher quality candidates.
Oh, I would agree. I would absolutely agree. This something kind of technical. I don't know we get into this so deeply in a video like this, but something that we talk about sometimes is called adverse pre-selection, where essentially the system is built around seniority so much that if you're a successful person as an educator, a business owner, whatever it might be from different walks of life, and you look at running for Congress, and even if you had a shot at winning, you're going to have to be there 12, 14, 15 years to really get a committee chairmanship or something where you can really play. So you look at that and go, well, I'm going to have to make a new career. And so it breeds careerism where it wouldn't be otherwise.
Yeah. Far gone are the days where Henry Clay walks into the House of Representatives and is elected Speaker the first day.
Right. You got that right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, Rhett Ramsey, we really appreciate you, all your support. We have just a remarkable crew of pledge signing candidates that are running this year, and we're just really excited about where that's going to go. And the Kentuckian people are behind you, 84% of us. So we'll be pulling for getting this done, and we appreciate your support and putting pen to paper to show your support so strongly to voters. So thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.